Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to be looking at lighting a large open space with two other rooms in the background, as you can see here. This is the first image we're going to be working on, with the kitchen as the main image, with the dining room in the background to the right, and then the living room area to the left. So let's get into Lightroom right now and I'll show you how to do this. This is the ambient layer, and all I did was make sure that I set my shutter speed to a exposure value that was going to push the histogram right here to the right of center. And this is the image we got. Now typically I like to run with lights off, but when I got there the homeowner had every single light on, and I thought, well, that's okay, I can deal with lights on. And again, they weren't super tungsten-y lighting, so I knew it wasn't going to be a major issue in post, so this is what we're working with here. Alright, so I did my final bump, or my initial bump, I should say. This is what it looked like straight out of camera, and as you can see from my histogram that I did push the exposure to the right, and then when I put my initial bump on there, and I have to make sure I put the correct lens on there, because I used the Leica 7.5mm f2, and I was at f4 for this image on the Olympus EM1 Mark II. So this is what that looks like if you're interested in that camera. Alright, so let's move on to one of the flash images. Okay, so as you can see here, I run with the Godox V1 on top of the camera, which is actually sitting on top of my Godox trigger. Because I like that one Godox trigger because it has a hot shoe on top of that, so you can put the trigger on top of your hot shoe of the camera and then the flash on top of the trigger. And then I use my 8200, as you can see, to do my other flash pops throughout the scene. So this one has already been already done my corrections. As you can see, we are popping a flash over here to light this area over here, and then I moved to the other side of the room here, and I already got my adjustments made. So we move over to this side and light here for this part of the room, so we can blend those two images together. I'll show you a really fast way to do that. And then I came around and I stood behind the wall here to make sure I lit the living room here and here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take all four of those images, right-click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Alright, so once all four layers are loaded up, we will have the ambient layer on top. If you shot the ambient first, which I recommend, making sure that you just get your ambient layer out of the way, and then adjust your shutter speed to make sure that you can see out of the windows, and then do your flash pops. So what we're going to do is we're just going to, actually, let's just see. I know in many tutorials I've talked about not using luminosity mode, but in this situation, and I use it when it works. If it's going to cause more headaches than solutions, I typically don't use it. But again, I'm getting away from not using luminosity mode because I am getting now more and more doing shoots with the lights off. So, and again, I've said this before, make sure your realtor is okay with you doing that, and try it. I suggest practicing with it, but it actually makes your life a lot easier in most circumstances. So for this situation, we are going to toggle the ambient layer off for now, and we have to work on this dining room image. So we are going to make sure it's highlighted, do a layer mask, Command I to invert it. And now here is what I like to do, make sure white is selected. Instead of doing the brush tool and painting ourselves out, I've found that using the gradient tool, just working right before or right in front of your light source there and dragging it just about mid-room there, making sure you're not going over into where you were standing before, or the other shot. And look at that, nice even blend on that. So now we can bring up the layer, this layer that is lighting the dining room, and we can do a layer, Command I to invert it, white is our brush, make sure the brush tool is selected, because now we just have to paint in that room, just like that. Alright, my flow is at 26%, doesn't really matter. So now we can focus on our ambient layer. And typically how I like to blend ambient regardless of if you use luminosity mode or not, is just to take it and drop it to 50%. And it all depends on how much color cast we have going on. So that's at 100% ambient light. If we let off, let's take it to, actually, let's see. Yeah, let's bring that back to 50%. And now I like to bring back in some flash around those windows. So I'm just going to do a layer mask, not invert it, make sure black is selected. And now we're just going to paint back in those windows, right like that. And I'm just looking over the image to see if there's anything else that stands out. I am going to up the contrast and whatnot in Lightroom, so everything looks pretty good to me. So what we can do is we're going to come down here to flatten image, Command S to save it, brings it back into Lightroom for us, and we can do our interior final bump. And that looks pretty good to me. I will tend to kick those blacks down a little bit more, maybe up the shadows a little bit. But there you go. There's the final image on this one. I'm going to show you one more example. Okay, so now here is the living room looking into the dining room, and the left room here is that dining room. So the image that we just got done editing, I was standing over here behind this wall right here shooting this way. So to light this area, this is where I stood, is behind, right in front of this TV basically, to light up both sides. Well, we're not going to be able to do that in this example. I'm just going to up my exposure a little bit. Let's move on to this one. This is my flash. Again, I'm lighting the living room and I'm lighting the kitchen all in one shot. Let's bring up that exposure a little bit more. And again, I probably should have reduced the flash power a little bit on that kitchen shot, but we'll make it work. And let's see, we're going to, just to make sure I bring in the correct images, I'm just hitting 1 on my keyboard. That's putting a little star down here. We're going to come over here. This is where I lit the dining room. And I already did my initial bumps on this one. Okay, so now we're going to highlight all 3 of these images, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. All right. And so typically what I would normally do in a situation like this is shut that ceiling fan off. And again, it's hard to remember to do everything, and it was just a lot of distractions, and I forgot to have them do that. So sometimes you can freeze it with the flash shot if your shutter speed is high enough, and you know that one is probably going to be the one I go with, but it is what it is, folks. So let's do this. Let's shut off our ambient layer for now. And what are we going to do? We're going to do command or mask and then command I to invert it. And that way we can brush back in. I'm going to drop my flow down here to like 6%. And we're going to paint back in the flash for this side. Like that. You can tell where I was standing because the flash is starting to get a little hot over on this part right here. If we can kind of brush that out on that corner like that to blend it in better. And now we can turn our ambient layer back on. Let's just see what luminosity mode does. I'm just going to leave it, and we're going to drop this to 50%. And I'm going to do a layer mask without inverting it. And now we can paint back in, try to repair that ceiling fan with just a flash shot. And that is going to be about as good as it gets. And that's why, learning from my mistakes, shut the ceiling fan off. Especially if you don't have a high enough shutter to freeze it. And then even then, you might have to deal with some shadows that aren't, that's why you always want to make sure you shut those ceiling fans off. But let's do this. Let's flatten the image here. And I'm going to get rid of some of that glare on the TV that can be distracting. We're just going to create a layer down here by clicking layer. And we're going to use our pen tool. I'm going to command plus sign to zoom in here. And we're just going to click on each corner of the TV. Like this. And we're going to right click, and fill path. And typically your color is going to be black by default, so hit OK, and then hit OK, and it will fill that in. Now just right click again and just come up and delete path. Now on your layer here, take your opacity and drop that, I don't know, usually 70% is good enough to give it some natural glare, but it definitely fixed the issue, the distraction issue, like that. And then we can flatten this image again. And we're going to Command S to save it, bring it back into Lightroom. Alright, it's back into Lightroom. We're going to do our interior final bump there. And you know what? That looks about good to me. Drop those blacks, maybe even more. But we have a nice even lit image there with our ambient layer, one flash pop to light this, and another flash pop to light this. And since we always have a light on top of the camera, we're keeping that other room lit to blend our two flashes, our flash images in better. So again, this channel is about helping beginners and maybe realtors who have been taking their own photos grow and improve on your real estate listing photos. So make sure to check out my other tutorials. This one's a good one. This is when I was on site, and I show you step by step on how to shoot and also edit. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.